Well, guys, thank you for joining us, talking about young adults, also something we have up here called the 80-20 stat, which we'll be going over. But if you guys have not met us already, my name is Diaz. I'm the Student Ministries Pastor here at Palm Valley.
And I'm Joey Contreras, the Young Adults Pastor here.
Yeah, and we are going to be talking about young adults a little bit more here today. I'm really thankful for this because I have the unique position where I led our young adult ministry for a while, and I was praying for Joey that entire time. And I wasn't just like praying for Joey as in like, God, bring another young adults pastor so I can focus on students and all of this. Like, I was specifically praying for Joey because I already knew he was supposed to have the job. And I already knew that he was the one that God desired to be in this role. It just wasn't time yet. And so I was honored to be the one leading young adults for a season and pouring into that ministry, preparing it for health, for what I knew was coming to you and everything. But now we have this interesting role where we're in partnership together all the time. We're working together because I'm taking the youth and I'm handing them off over to Joey. And you mentioned how you're always in high school and everything. My perspective is that I'm the pastor for the 6th graders through the 11th graders. And once they hit 12th grade, senior year, I'm working hard to start to make that shift for them to see that Joey is now their pastor. And that's the kind of relationship we have when it comes to young adults right here. Would you say?
Yeah, and just he had alluded to a little bit earlier, in one way that I tried to be intentional about partnering with our whole family life team is because on Sunday, we have a young adult gathering on Wednesday nights, and so it kind of frees me up on Sundays, which is pretty cool. So what I do with that time is I really just enjoy spending it in our high school ministry hours and just being intentional about connecting with like the upperclassmen and just being there for the students so I can know them, they can know me, so that it offers a warm kind of transfer when they do graduate into the young adult ministry.
So today I'm going to kind of head up the first portion of our discussion here, talking more about the youth side of this kind of conversation together, and then from there Joey will take it. But the first question I want you guys to think through, I would love this to be a question you guys talk about in your tables that you're in right now, is what are the factors that you measure to see if your ministry is successful? What are the factors that you use to measure to see if your youth ministry is healthy and successful? Take a moment, turn your guys' groups, and maybe list out what are some specific things, whether it be, involvement, how many students are attending, how do you measure that? All right, real quick, what are some of the factors that you guys mentioned in your groups? And yes, there are wrong answers, and I'll tell you if I'm just kidding, no. I am curious though, like what are some of the things you guys said? Okay, yeah, if they're shrinking, that's a clear problem. Yeah, that's not a good thing right there. Awesome, that's a good sign right there. Do you guys have a good one on your table right here? Like a factor you guys use? Spiritual growth, that's awesome. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So knowing, if there's negative effects, that could be a sign that maybe something's not going pretty well. And if there aren't negative effects, that's a good sign, right? Another one is spiritual growth. You see them growing in their faith. One that I would have said for a long time, and this is heavily influenced because of my story and the reason why I came to Christ, is student involvement. So what I was really big on when, and I still am big on, right, when I was first starting out youth ministry and first became a youth pastor, was doing my best, working my hardest to help students get connected, building relationships with each other, getting connected into groups, being connected into mission trips, and making sure they have great relationships here at Palm Valley Church. And I was actually really, really good at it. I think that was something that God had gifted me in, was helping students feel connected, building relationships here, making friends here, being a part of what we are doing as a church, joining us on mission trips, being a part of groups. And I was seeing growth with that. We were seeing growth with that. But within my first couple of years of youth ministry, something that I noticed was I was helping get a lot of students involved and plugged in and be a part of what we're doing. And the moments that they graduated high school, they were gone. The moment that they graduated high school and they were no longer a part of our youth ministry, their faith went along with it. There's a rule or a stat, what we call the 80-20 stat, that says that 80% of high school students walk away from their faith once they graduate high school. 80%. That means 80% of the students within our youth ministries right here, right now, will no longer be following Jesus the moment that they walk away from your youth ministry. And unfortunately for me, I think I was closer to the 90-10 range where 90% of my students were walking away from their faith. And 10% or fewer were continuing to follow Jesus. And I was struggling because I didn't know why. I was like, I'm helping them get involved. I'm helping them build friendships. They're in groups. They're going on mission trips. They're doing all these things. What's going on? Why are these students walking away from Christ? And it took time, but then God revealed to me that what I was doing is I was helping students fall in love with Palm Valley, but they weren't falling in love with Jesus. So the moment that Palm Valley Student Ministries at PVC was gone from their life and they couldn't be a part of it anymore, their faith went with it. Because the cornerstone of their faith was PVC students, not Jesus. And so I had to take a hard look at my approach to ministry to see what can we do or what should we be doing so that way students are actually following with Jesus. Because what doesn't really matter is how many students we have in the ministry. Yes, that's important. We had a whole breakout about how numbers matter to Jesus, right? Like, numbers are important, but the numbers that I believe are truly important are not just the people who are attending, but the people who are taking steps drawing closer to Jesus. And in a youth ministry setting, those who are wanting to take their faith and follow Jesus long-term for their lives. Because the ones that do that will have greater impact long-term. In fact, they will impact greater numbers than just what you had in your actual group right there. And so what I want to talk about today, and what me and Joey want to talk about, is what can we be doing as youth ministers, as youth pastors, to create a recipe where students are more likely to stick in their faith long-term, and to kind of pull away from that 80%, 20% stat, and to make it more into our favor, right? And so today we want to talk about things that are within our control, because there are a lot of factors that are not within our control. I would compare this kind of discussion we're about to have today more as like a proverb than a promise. If you guys know about like the Proverbs are general truths that are generally true in life, right? So this will generally happen to us. I want to give us a recipe that will be generally helping people stick to their faith long term. But we also have to recognize that, like we had mentioned in our other kind of breakouts, the greatest influence in their walk with Jesus is not us, it's their parents. So the hard thing is that so many of our students that are walking away from Christ, it's not because of the influence of us, it's some of the things going on in the home. It's part of the reason why we talked about discipleship of parents is such a big deal for us in family life. I had, this is off my notes, but you know what, why not? We'll talk about it. I was having a small group with my students about last semester. I was in a group, and I had a bunch of high school guys in there, and we had a conversation. I just asked them questions on, hey, how many of you talk about Jesus and pray with your families? And only one student out of the group actually did. All of them, besides that one student, said, we don't pray with our parents. We don't talk about Jesus with our parents. That was pretty eye-opening. I'm like, oh, okay, that explains a lot what's going on here. And those are some things that at the end of the day, like, we can't control parents, right? We can disciple them, we can pour into them. But what I want to talk about is what are things that we can do as youth pastors that would help promote the most growth and long-term success within our ministries. So the big thing we're going to be talking about is high relationships and high standards. A recipe that helps promote long-term connection to the faith is this beautiful combination of high-level relationships and high-level standards with our students. I as we go into each one of these sections, I want to define these terms because one thing I've learned really quickly in my time is that if we don't define words, we can often get confused because if you talk to students, you'd be surprised how many students don't realize what the definitions we're using are like they don't understand them. So a couple weeks ago, I learned that our high schoolers didn't know what humility meant, which was surprising to me. That's a good reminder why we need to define words. But I also got married this last year, and I learned very quickly that you can be using the same words and have two completely different definitions. So I would like to provide some definitions of what I mean by these terms. So to start off, we're gonna go with high-level relationships. High-level relationships is a developed connection where a pastor or mentor has earned the trust of a student and has proven their care for them. You have earned their trust, and you have proven your care for them. Students need to know that we care about them. They have to know that we are willing to give up our lives to them before they're even ever willing to listen to anything we have to say. I mean, this was the model of Jesus, right? Jesus proved repeatedly to people that he deeply cared for them. And then, because of the care he had for them, that had such an impact on their walks with him and the trajectory of their lives right there. And so with students, we have to learn how to develop this close relationship with them. Otherwise, they don't care what we have to say. It doesn't mean anything to them. And so something that we are really big on first is finding ways to develop high-level relationships with our students, because we know that if you don't have that high-level relationship, they just, no matter what you teach them, it goes in one ear and goes out the other. It doesn't mean anything to them. So what does that look like? How do we develop high-level relationships? Some things that we do is we always do games based on relationships. We have games all the time that are focused on building connections with mentors and leaders and other students within church. So, for example, we have a game that we played this last weekend here at Goodyear called Bevies and Bops. This is a game that we play once every 2 months, 3 months or so. I'd say once every 3 months. So once a quarter, we play this game called Bevies and Bops. And in this game, what we do is we literally just put up questions on the screen. We give everyone a drink, so everyone has Capri Suns in their hand or something. We play some music, and they walk around. They have to find someone with the same color shoes as them, the same color shirt as them, and they just talk through a question. And it'll be a question of something like if you were what's your favorite form of potato? Because there are a lot of different forms of potato. It's shocking what you can do with potatoes. And students. And students will just talk about all right, I like sweet potatoes, I like baked potatoes, I like French fries, and it's cool to help them get them to start having conversations with them. And it's a great way for our volunteers and our leaders just to start a natural conversation about something with them. What we're doing is we're developing that relationship. We're showing that, hey, I'm getting to know you as a human being, and I'm getting to know you as a person. Another thing we do is personal invites towards groups. That's where I see groups grow the most. So our model is we have services for students on Sunday at the same time as adults, and then during the week we have small groups for our students. We'll give flyers out, we will send emails, we'll do posts, we'll do all forms of communication to our families and to our students, and they hardly grow through that model. It's important for us to do that, but where I see the most growth by far with students getting involved with groups is a mentor, volunteer who has talked to them, gotten to know them a little bit throughout the week, just saying, hey, why don't you come join my small group? That's where we see that growth. That's where we see those students getting connected. So personal invitations towards our small groups, mission trips, camps, these experiences where they're getting exposure to the leaders and the adults within the room. And then next would be meeting students on their turf. Finding ways to connect with students outside of church walls. Show up to their baseball game. Is it boring? Dear God, yes, it's boring. But it means the world to them when you just show up and they'll talk to you for 2 minutes, say, thank you for coming. But it really makes a huge difference in their minds that you showed up to their baseball game. Personally, I like the plays the best. Plays are great. Sometimes those are boring too. I remember I sat through a 2.5-hour play about, who's the Jewish girl that, Anne Frank. Yeah, there was a play of Anne Frank, and it was 2.5 hours of why her life sucked. And my gosh, I wish I can take those 2.5 hours back. But the students loved it. And you know what, sometimes, I'm frustrated because I've sat through 2.5-hour plays for a student, and they were in it for 3 seconds. They were the tree that ran in the back real quick, and they were gone, and that was it. And I'm like, why was I here? And they're so excited that I just showed up, and I saw them as a dumb tree for 3 seconds. Oh, gosh. Getting frustrated, dude. Yeah. Yeah, I've gone to a game. I went to a game with Titus right here with a guy, and we were looking around on the field, and I had to ask him in the middle of the game, does he play for this team, or are we at the wrong game? Because we didn't even know which one he was, and then he didn't show up to church for a month after that, right? So, but these are just small ways that through our actions, we are communicating to these students that I will go above and beyond to be there in your life because I care deeply about you. Once you've proven that you care about them and you have developed a high-level quality relationship with them, then you can move on to the next step because that's only part of it. And I think this was the part that I was very good at first. So, question real quick for you guys to talk about is, what have you found to be the most effective way to build high-level relationships? I gave some examples. We have games based off that. We invite people to groups and trips and stuff like that. And then we also show up onto their turf. We show up to their games or things. Is there something else or something you guys do that you have found to be the most effective way to build relationships with students? Take a moment to talk about it in your tables. I like right here mentioning remembering the little things. That's a good one. I love how many times I've talked to a student and they're talking about Minecraft, and in my head I'm like, I don't care. I don't care about Minecraft, but because it's important to them, it's important to me, right? So those are great ways to show students you care, just listening and caring with the little things and following up with them on that. So I think a lot of us understand this is you need to have close relationships with students. You have to have high-level relationships with them if you're going to have an impact within their lives. But the second portion to this, and this is where I think I was struggling early on in my ministry that I need to grow in, is once you have a high-level relationship with the students, you now have to start to develop high-level standards for the students. High-level standards. What do I mean by that? High-level standards is continually challenging students to take steps of submitting their lives to Christ at a degree appropriate to the maturity of their faith. I know that's a mouthful right there, but I try to paint as clear of a picture as I could of what I mean by this on high-level standards is we are continually challenging them to take steps of submitting their lives to Christ. But we're also remembering where they are in their faith. Session 3 yesterday, Amy St. Louis, she talked about this process of come and see, come and walk, and come and die. This is something we've mentioned over and over again here at Healthy Church, is slowly turning up the temperature for people. And we need to slowly turn up the temperature for our students. We need to recognize where they are in their faith. And if they've never come to Jesus before, they're just brand new, hey, come and see. Come check it out. If they're continuing, maybe giving their life to Christ, it's come and walk. Come and get to know who this Jesus is. Come to know his personality. Up to the point where finally it's like, okay, you've been following Jesus for a while now. It's time to come and die. And we want to hold students to that standard of asking them to come and see, come and walk, and come and die. So that way they are learning that following Jesus is not just about having fun at your youth group or having fun at church. Following Jesus is about giving up your life as he gave up for his life for us. And what I've seen is anytime I've held students to these high standards or people I've poured into at these high standards, it has had such a positive impact on the trajectory of their faith. So we have one student who I still continue to have a great relationship with as a young adult. When he first came into our ministry, he came because his brother invited him. He wasn't going to church. When he first showed up, he showed up to one of our small groups. And I met him, and it was his birthday the first time he showed up. And we had a conversation about Star Wars and everything. So love Star Wars. We had a good time. So the next week, I came and I brought a little plastic Star Wars lightsaber for him. Just went to the store real quick, picked it up, gave it to him. Hey, happy birthday, dude. And he remembers it. It was a big deal to him that this guy just bought him a Star Wars lightsaber. So this person that wasn't interested in church, wasn't going to church, had no interest whatsoever, just he came and saw, we showed him love and care, and so he kept on showing up. Over time, he started to get to know Jesus. He started serving. He started being a part of things. He started reading the Bible. He was walking with Jesus. And then a couple of years now down the road, where it's 2 or 3 years, I still had a personal relationship with him. And I had a conversation with him where I pulled him aside and I said, hey, listen, I have noticed in your faith that you were in this section where you were come and see. And now for a while now, you've been walking with Jesus. But I'm recognizing that there are patterns within your life where you're not fully submitting your heart to Jesus. But there is this pattern that Jesus gives people where he asks them to come and see, come and walk, and then come and die, which means to die to your selfish ways and instead follow the ways of Jesus as your Lord and Savior. This is the time. You've been following Jesus long enough. It is time to now pick up your cross and follow him. You can't continue these ways anymore. If they live up to that standard, is between them and God. We can't force that on them. But amazingly, this young adult now at this point when I had this conversation with him lived up to that standard. And he said, you know what? Okay. And because I challenged him to now come and die, he now started changing some of his patterns, some of his habits. And now the dude is fully following Jesus. He is leading others. He's constantly having conversations with people who don't know Jesus. He's inviting them to church. He's sharing the gospel with them. He is pouring into our students right now in our youth ministry. So now someone who was a student is investing into the lives of our students. All because we held him to a high standard that initially started with a high-level relationship. And it took that progress to now see him continuing to live out his life for Christ. And I've seen this in other areas too. There's another student that we have who he was one of those students that you would say is just off the wall. Is that what you would say? Yeah, he's just out there. He's making decisions that are unhealthy. He's someone that I love, I care about. I've had a good relationship for a long time, but unfortunately, he just keeps on getting involved with the wrong people. And so something we do every single year is we challenge our students to go on a mission trip where they're going to go share the good news of Jesus with others. Some of you guys, I partnered with some of you guys on that trip. And one of our students, he got suspended for school for smoking weed right before the trip started. And so I had to have a conversation with him and said, hey, listen, we want to operate with grace. This happened before the trip. I want you to be on this trip, but here's the thing. If you're going to be on this trip, all of our requirements, you have to live up to this standard. Everyone has grace. We give a grace to our students, like you can miss so many days until you're off the trip. With him, it was like, if you miss one thing, you're gone. Because I care about you. I want you here, but if you're not living up to these standards, it's showing it's not time. It wasn't an easy conversation. And it was even a harder conversation when he didn't live up to the standards. And we had to tell him, listen, hey, I think it would be best for you if you don't go on this trip. And he was not happy about it. He was not excited about it. And we did have a plan. We had a plan where, hey, you know what? I know you can't go on this trip. For the next 3 months, you're going to be meeting up with this mentor weekly, and you're going to be talking about things you're going through. And after that, this student had grown tremendously in his faith. And he made a complete 180 turn. And about a month ago, someone that was hardly following Jesus a year ago now made this big difference. He actually came up to me and he's like, Zach, when you had that conversation with me, I gained so much respect for you. And he shared how us telling him no and holding him to a high standard is what pushed him to finally make some of the changes he made. So that way, he's now counting since the last time he's been on drugs. And now he's not pursuing that lifestyle anymore. And now he's pursuing after Jesus. And now we have the trip coming up, and I hope to have him on it this year. And again, we're hoping that he lives up to these standards, right? I'm not going to make a promise right there, but I believe he can do it this year. Because we had high-level relationships and kept them to high-level standards. And it takes that combo to keep students not just engaged, but also to kind of live the kind of life where they continue to follow Jesus outside of just the ministry you have. So the last question I have for you guys before I pass it off to Joey is, why do you think having high-level standards for teens helps promote lasting faith? Why do you think having a high level for them, keeping high standards for them, high expectations for them, helps promote a lasting faith? Young adults, half the answer is just the student ministry side and how we handle it in student ministries. But I guess to clarify, one thing I was just sharing in this group right here is the high-level relationships come first. You have to have the high-level relationships before you have the high standards, or you're going to burn bridges pretty badly right there. But when you do have those high-level relationships and you do hold them to high standards, what I've seen so far in our experience and what I've seen from other youth pastors and other churches and other families I look to, God blesses tremendously with that. And all the success we've had since then, we have way more students that have been well connected to the church since graduated now that we have like this new standard. And that's not due to us. I believe that's due to the Holy Spirit, but we've just given the Holy Spirit more opportunities to work within the hearts of our students. So
I love that. I love that. Jesus, Justin over here had mentioned that Jesus very much intended for his disciples to have a lasting faith. And, we are the beneficiaries of that 2,000 years later. And he had an extraordinarily high standard for them and for all of us, too. So I think they do feed into each other. But again, I'm Joey and oversee our young adults ministry. And I'm actually relatively new to this role. But even though that's the case, I was just recently invited into this role back in August of last year. I've actually always been passionate about young adults, about serving young adults. I've been doing so for over a decade, from leading small groups to coaching young adult small group leaders to just taking a personal interest in young adults in my life, like here at church. I happened to grow significantly in my faith during my formative young adult years. And I even met my wife, Selena, at a young adult small group here in PVC back in 2010 when we were young adults, which wasn't that long ago. So I know I have been personally impacted and blessed by our young adult ministry as a young adult. And it is truly my honor and privilege that I can give back and pour back into the young adults as a older adult. So my wife and I, Selena, we've been married just over 9 years, and we're in the process of adopting a baby, and so we're really excited about that. Just a little personal side note about me, but I'm here to talk about why young adults. Why even have a young adult ministry? They're adults, right? And so you have kids, you have students, and then you have adults, which just points them back to the big church. So why have like a separate ministry for young adult aged people? And so our young adult ministry is from 18 or high school graduates to 25 years old. Well, why have young adults? Well, because Gen Z comprises of 24% of the population, which is about 74 million Americans. That's 1 in 4 Americans. 1 in 4 people are Gen Z. That is the age range of our young adults right now. Why have that? Because that's a quarter of your church. And 97% of people who become Christians do so before the age of 30, according to the National Association of Evangelicals survey. That is staggering, 97%. Raise your hand here if you came to Christ after the age of 30. 2. Fairly representative, right? Jack, you're not even 30. Put your hand down. And so I'm going to argue that young adult ministry is supplemental. It's supplemental, and these digital natives, they've They grew up with cell phones. They had Instagram before they were even in high school, and they don't remember a time before the internet. And so this makes young adults very distinct from their generational predecessors in how they spend their time, how they behave, and their attitudes towards religion, sexuality, politics, all the stuff we just love talking about at church, right? But does anyone here take vitamins? Just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you take vitamins. Yeah. Has anybody ever taken a vitamin on an empty stomach? That sucks, huh? That's rough, right? You feel sick because it's supplemental. It's supposed to be on top of your normal diet. And so, again, I'm going to argue that a young adult ministry is supplemental. It's in addition to their normal Sunday diet. It's I don't know, you can call it like a parachurch ministry, just regardless of how you frame it. I believe that we need a young adult ministry now more than ever because young adults need the church now more than ever. But they don't need another church service, but something that is more focused to the unique issues that they're facing. So a question I'd like to pose to you guys on your table is, what are some unique issues that young adults are facing today? What are some unique issues that our young adults are facing today? The question is going to pull up on the screen here, and I'd love for you guys to just discuss that among your tables. Yeah. Like, get a job. Yeah. Get your driver's license, Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Okay. I know at our table, there was a lot of just economic struggles that they're facing today, unique, because houses aren't, $40,000 anymore. And to move out of your parents' house is really tough. And so some unique issues I found that a lot of our young adults are facing today, I've kind of labeled them our cultural viruses, because that's exactly what they are. And they are new atheism, sexual confusion, anti-biblical rhetoric, and the mental health crisis. Did any of your tables mention mental health or anxiety or depression at all? Yeah, a few of us, okay. Well, and something I think that is difficult for us older generations to keep up with just how quickly and deeply social media, Netflix, and college is discipling Gen Z into apostasy. See, the truth is that our culture has changed, and we are all in this together. And this generation is the ideal place to look for trends that's going to shape our culture and our church in the years to come. So to look at our young adults and to try to learn from them and try to glean from them, hear their feedback is going to be crucial as we plan for the church leading into the future. And again, like I said, young adult ministry, I believe, is supplemental, but it is culturally crucial. Culturally crucial, because if we don't start creating disciples through systematic confrontation with their psychological, with their economic, and their theological and political realities, we'll completely abdicate discipleship to the social media crazy people espouting wild ideas, these apostates on TikTok, spewing out all this garbage. But anyone here a Lord of the Rings fan? Who loves Lord of the Rings? Okay, I'm obsessed with Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. And I strongly believe, and I get super passionate about, I know my friend Zach here, he knows just how jacked up I get, but I feel like the time is now for us as leaders to just go full Gandalf on the Balrog, right? With all of these cultural viruses, with our young adults close to our hearts, we say, you shall not pass, right? So that's my Lord of the Rings plug. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. But this life stage, our young adult community, they just need extra coaching because psychologically their brains are still developing. Our brains will continue to develop until we're about 25 years old, but sociologically, they generally differ from their predecessors by having what's called delayed adolescence. And this terminology is not my own. I got it from this book right here. It's called iGen by Jean Twenge. She's a professor of psychology at San Diego State University. It's iGen, Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adulthood, and What That Means to the Rest of Us. Long title. Highly recommend this book. If you want to learn more about this generation, if you're kind of a nerd like me, like this is filled with like graphs and statistics, right? And just data. So just straight data. So you can't really argue with a lot of the findings from here because of the multiple different sources that they're getting this information from. But another book I would recommend if you're writing this down is called Young Adult Ministry Now by Stephen Argue. That's like the word argue, A-R-G-U-E. Young Adults Ministry Now by Stephen Argue. Another really great book to read if you want to learn more about young adults and what that looks like. And so what does delayed adolescence mean? It's really just developmental speed is an adaptation to a cultural context. So in other words, young adults today, they've adopted a slower life strategy. An 18-year-old today looks more like a 14-year-old did 15, 20 years ago. And the biggest difference with them is how they spend their time. So compared to their predecessors, like teens and young adults now are less likely to go out with their parents, date, have sex, drive, work, or drink alcohol. Now, if teens are working less, not doing their homework, going out less, drinking less, all this stuff, what do you think they're doing? Social media, what? Video games, technology, phone. Look no further than the devices that are in their hands. But you notice some of these aren't bad, right? Like some of these aren't totally bad. But generally speaking, these trends show that things that adults normally do, they're just kicking that can down the road by several years. And as somebody had mentioned too, they're kind of like in that between stage. Like they're no longer a kid, but they don't quite feel like they've fully entered into full adulthood yet either. And again, these are all generalities. Like there's some exceptional young adults that are far more beyond their years and very mature. But these are generally speaking things. But because of the new social and economic challenges that they face, it makes their pathhood to adulthood just longer and more challenging. And these little snapshots, they really should remind us older adults that the decisions that young adults are making, they're not always related to personal choice, quality of character, or work ethic. They're responding to the unique social, economic, and cultural world that they've inherited. This is kind of the world that they're stepping into. And in order to make it through, they really need the support of their church way more than the support that they're getting from their culture. So how do we, as the church, disciple young adults? How do we disciple them? And it's important for any relationship to know that it takes two to tango. And I know that there can be oftentimes an overemphasis on young adults leaving the church, and ultimately any kind of apostasy that takes place, any kind of leaving the faith is between them and the Lord. But us as church leaders, I think it's healthy for us to do some introspection and to see first if there's a plank in our own eyes and reflect on our own behaviors. Because if churches fail to reflect on the assumptions or the attitudes that we have towards young adults or the actions that we have toward them, then we may be creating barriers for young adults to connect with the church at large. So, for example, has anyone here has ever had any doubts about their faith? Just generally, anyone had doubts, right? A lot of us, probably all of us. So we just recently came back from a young adult weekend up at UCYC camp in Prescott. It's like up the mountains, and it was awesome. And that was really just kind of the theme over the weekend. It's like, let's address your doubts. Let's talk about your doubts. Because doubting is just a part of faithing. Is that a word? I don't think that's a word. Doubting is a part of faithing. But doubting isn't rejecting faith, but trying to make sense of it. And if young adults don't have the confidence that they can work through their doubts in church, they often just are forced to look elsewhere, like the very biblically sound world of TikTok, right? Because they're just gonna get a bunch of truth on that platform. But questions, doubts, and differing views should become welcome topics for spiritual growth rather than religious threats. And this shift often opens up new possibilities for better conversations and relevant support for this age group. But as you can see on the slides there, ultimately, how we disciple them, it's not as challenging as we think it is. I think ultimately young adults, they just, whether you're saved or not, they just want to have fun and make friends. They want to have fun and make friends, and they want to be known. They want to be loved. And surprisingly, they want to be challenged. Going back to high standards and high relationships, that theme carries on into young adulthood. They want those high relationships with others, but they also want those high standards. Because once they see the real deal in Jesus, I'm in the camp of having the unpopular opinion that young adults really do want to rise up to the challenge. I believe they do. And this requires a community that young adult ministry provides with focused intentionality. And because they've been on their phones so much, their skills, they've had less time with developing those skills of building social skills and negotiating relationships and navigating emotions. So by creating an environment where this can happen, where they can be known, loved, and challenged, this is the heart of having this culturally crucial ministry. And so, as we wrap up, looking at the time here, I get obviously really passionate about young adult ministry, and I can talk a little bit more about this, but just to provide some history on our young adult ministries here at Palm Valley Church. It initially started with just some young adults coming together in a small group setting. And that really just kind of grew into something pretty amazing. It started off with just one small group and somebody who was inspired to do the same thing that leader was doing, and then multiplication started happening. We ended up having several young adult small groups, and whether you have small or large gatherings, it doesn't really matter. What I think is more important than the format is your guys' purpose of gathering. What's the purpose of your guys' gathering? So currently, we've moved from small groups being the predominant method to a larger gathering, to like a large group kind of setting. We will be launching small groups over the summer, but we meet weekly on Wednesday nights at 7:30. And the doors open at 7. And that half-hour time, that first half hour, is just pure fellowship. It's just come and hang out. There's no agenda there. But then we'll get into some kind of teaching. Sometimes we'll have worship songs. Other times we'll have them break out into groups with discussion questions. We also really are intentional about giving them opportunities to put their faith into practice, because I believe that young adult ministry should be heavily practical, by praying for one another, partaking in communion, having time where they can just reflect on the message and have some space for just quiet meditation and prayer. We have taken some creative liberty here with our ministry, and it should really look different than Sunday. It should look different than Sunday, and being creative, that's another encouragement that I would give you guys, because it's okay to try something and just totally fail. We learn more from our failures than our successes. And now we may try new things with our young adult ministry, but one thing that we're definitely not trying to do is like rebrand Christianity for Gen Z, because what they need are the exact same things that every single Christian has needed for the last 2,000 years and has worked every single time. That's teaching them Scripture, truth, friendship with God, worship, the sacraments, those things. And I know that we need to be creative in teaching them how to implement this into their lives, teaching them the disciplines, teaching them about just killing their ego and allowing Christ to form in them. Young adults need to be hardened for battle and learn servant leadership through the context of the local church. When we had a series last year on practices, we were being practical with the practices. And so when we were talking about the several different practices of Christianity, one of them was serving. And so we got practical. We were teaching on John 13 of Jesus washing feet. We didn't wash each other's feet, but we washed each other's cars. We had a little raffle. We made fun of it too. Every single young adult that was there on Wednesday night were given towels, buckets, soaps, sponges, and hoses to wash 10 cars. So we got to actually put that into practice. That was us using some of our creative freedom to get very practical. We've even shared in meals together. We have prayed for one another. We've prayed in groups. And our emphasis is on fellowship and discipleship because it's different than Sunday. Sunday's focus is worship and reaching the lost. Our young adult ministry, because it's whether it's a small or large group, we want to have that emphasis be slightly different with fellowship and discipleship. Another thing I added on here kind of last minute was developing a leadership team. So a leadership team, this team of key leaders that can help you, so it's not just on you leading the young adult ministry, will help you discern, plan, brainstorm ideas, and just seek together the best way to grow the ministry. And these leaders will offer very helpful perspectives on how you can serve your young adult community. I would suggest including both young adults and older adults too, to kind of provide a more well-rounded perspectives in it, and then just weigh together the possibilities. Own those decisions. In that group, you can honor generations and ultimately just share the load with one another. Lastly, values are like a compass. They help you with direction and purpose. So if you establish values that you can always point back to in the ministry, that could be just that standard. And the values that we've established here at Palm Valley for our young adult ministry is wisdom, growth, boldness, and family. Wisdom is the foundation, right? Is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Growth is basically kind of like a simplified version of sanctification, because how we've defined growth is that it's a partnership between you and God where you progressively become more and more free from sin and more like Christ. Boldness is definitely kind of something that was close to my heart, and I know it's something that our young adults need to be challenged in, and something that I've definitely learned from this book is there is an aversion to uncertainty. It's a desire for security, and boldness really forces them to get out of that comfort zone and to step out in faith. And then lastly, family. It's multifaceted because we're trying to build a young adult community, family. They have a church family that they're connected to on Sundays. They're also connected to the Big C Church with churches globally that they have brothers and sisters all over. And then also because they're young adults, there's a high chance that most of them will become future fathers and mothers. And so I feel that it is my job as the young adults pastor to help raise future mothers and fathers, because they're going to be they're going to have their own families as well. And so a question I would like to just ask you guys, and you can discuss this in your tables, and after this we'll go ahead and call it. But what are some things that you can do or are doing with your young adult community? What are some things that you do or are doing with your young adult community? And if you're not, what is something that you would like to do or like to implement?